She laughed at his shoes. Not cruelly, not maliciously, just the careless laugh of someone who has never once had to think about the price of anything. "Are those from a gas station?" she asked, glancing down at his scuffed black sneakers as she breezed past the security desk with a coffee in one hand and her father's company badge clipped to her blazer. He smiled, said nothing. He didn't tell her that 6 floors above her head, in an office she had never been allowed to enter, there was a portrait of his mother. He didn't tell her that the building she worked in, the elevator she rode, the lights she never thought to turn off, the salary that landed in her account every second Friday, all of it existed because of the signature his family had made 31 years ago. He didn't tell her any of that, because for the first time in his life, someone was talking to him like he was just a man, and he wasn't ready to lose that yet. The city glittered below like something spilled and forgotten. 40 floors up. The glass wasn't a window. It was a wall between two different kind of people, and Adrian Cole had spent his entire life on the wrong side of it. His father's voice came through the phone, flat and final. The way it always was when he'd already made a decision and was only pretending to ask the question. "You'll take the Vienna position. Chief Operating Officer. It's done, Adrian. I announced it this morning." Adrian didn't answer right away. He was 29 years old, and he could count on one hand the number of decisions in his life that had actually belonged to him. "You didn't ask me," he said quietly. "I don't need to ask you. You're my son." There it was. Not "I trust you," not "you've earned this," just ownership. The way you talk about a piece of property that happened to have opinions. Adrian looked at his reflection in the dark glass. The tailored jacket, the watch worth more than most people's cars, a face the tabloids had photographed since he was 17, always next to a headline that reduced him to a net worth. Cole heir, Cole fortune, Cole legacy. Never just, "Adrian, I need some time," he said. "Time for what?" He almost laughed. He didn't know how to answer that question honestly, because the true answer, "I don't know who I am without this name," would have sounded insane coming from a man who'd just been handed control of a European division worth $900 million. So instead, he said the only thing that felt true. "I need to know if anyone would want me if I had nothing." Silence on the line. Then his father's voice quieter, almost human. "That's a dangerous question to ask, son. Most people don't survive the answer." The uniform felt strange against the skin. Gray polyester. A name badge that read A. Cole in small block letters. His actual surname, hiding in plain sight, because no one in this building had ever bothered to learn the first name of the man who signed their paychecks. That was the twisted genius of it. He didn't need a fake identity. He just needed people to stop looking at him. And it turned out, if you put a rich man behind a desk instead of behind stage, the world simply stopped looking. He'd told exactly 3 people the truth. His father, who thought this was reckless and said so daily. His head of security, Marcus, a 50-year-old ex-military man who'd sighed for a full 10 seconds before agreeing to supervise him, and his lawyer, who made him sign a waiver before he'd even discuss it. Everyone else, the 211 employees of Cole Industries' flagship building, believed he was exactly what the badge said. Security. Replaceable. Invisible. Beneath notice. He stood behind the front desk at 8:47 a.m. on his first real day, watching the elevator doors open and close, spilling out people in expensive suits who didn't glance at him twice. And then the doors opened one more time. She stepped out already mid-sentence. Phone pressed to her ear. Dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but clearly wasn't. A stack of folders under one arm like she'd been born holding them. No. Tell Denholm the projections are wrong. I already flagged it twice." She stopped walking for exactly 1 second to glance at the new guard. Her eyes did the thing eyes do when they're cataloging a stranger. Quick, efficient, dismissive. "New guy," she said, not to him. To the older guard beside him, a heavy-set man named Ronnie who'd worked the desk for 11 years. "Yeah, Adrian. Starts today." She looked at Adrian for exactly 2 more seconds. "Try not to let anyone steal the copier again," she said, already walking, already back on her call. Seriously, it happened twice last year. And then she was gone, swallowed by the revolving doors, and Adrian Cole, heir to a fortune most people couldn't count without a calculator, stood there feeling something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Completely, thoroughly unremarkable. It should have stung. It didn't. It felt like air after drowning. "That's Elena Vasquez," Ronnie said, following his gaze. "Runs half the acquisitions floor. Sharp as hell. Doesn't have time for anybody who isn't useful to her. Doesn't have time for anybody who isn't useful to her." Adrian filed that away like a warning label. He should have listened to it. Some rules of the disguise. Adrian learned quickly. Wear the uniform, and you become furniture. People will complain about their bosses 6 feet from you, like you're a potted plant. They will cry in stairwells, assuming no one can hear. They will reveal, in 100 careless, unguarded moments, exactly who they are when they think no one important is watching. This was supposed to be the whole point of the experiment. To see people as they truly were, stripped of the performance they put on for a coal. What he hadn't expected was how much he'd start to like being the potted plant. He learned the building the way you learn a person, not from a file, but from its habits. The janitor, Beatrice, who hummed old gospel songs at 6 a.m. and always saved him a coffee from the machine on the 3rd floor. The good one, not the sludge, upstairs. The intern, Jamal, who was terrified of being fired and asked Adrian for advice on a spreadsheet formula, not knowing he was asking the man who could buy the software company that made it. And Elena, who worked later than anyone else on her floor. Elena, who argued with senior partners twice her age and somehow won more often than she lost. Elena, who Adrian noticed, because by now he noticed everything about her, which should have concerned him more than it did. Ate lunch alone at her desk 4 days out of 5, scrolling through something on her phone with an expression he couldn't quite name. Not sad exactly. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. It was a Tuesday when she finally spoke to him again. Really spoke, not the clipped, distracted command she tossed guards on her way past. She came down at 9:40 p.m., the lobby empty except for him, her heels echoing off the marble like punctuation marks. "You're still here," she said, surprised. "Someone has to be." She almost smiled. Almost. Rough day up there. Don't ask. Wasn't going to. That, apparently, was the correct answer, because she stopped instead of walking straight past, leaning against the front desk with a particular exhaustion of someone who'd been performing competence for 11 hours straight and had just, for one unguarded moment, let it drop. "Do you like this job?" she asked, and there was something oddly genuine in the question. Not the polite nothing people ask service workers to feel good about themselves, but real curiosity. Adrian considered the question longer than she probably expected. "I like watching people," he said finally. "Everyone thinks no one's paying attention to them down here. So they're honest. It's the most honest part of this whole building." Something shifted in her face. She studied him a beat too long. That's a strange thing for a security guard to say. "You have no idea," he thought. "I read a lot," he said instead. She laughed. Actually laughed, tired and real. And for a moment the marble lobby didn't feel like the ground floor of an empire. It felt like the first honest conversation Adrian Cole had had in years. "I'm Elena," she said, extending a hand like they hadn't technically met 3 weeks ago. Like this was a fresh start. He shook it. His father's ring, a Cole family signet, worth more than her annual salary, was sitting in a drawer at home. Tonight, his hand was just a hand. "Adrian," he said. Just Adrian. For the first time since he could remember, the name felt like it belonged entirely to him. It started small. A coffee she brought down without being asked. "Since you're always down here freezing while the rest of us hide in heated offices." A 5-minute conversation that stretched, some nights, to 40. She started taking the stairs instead of the elevator on nights she worked late. An extra 90 seconds that put her past his desk instead of the private executive elevator around the corner. He noticed that. He noticed everything. He learned that she clawed her way into acquisitions from an unpaid internship, that she sent money home to a mother in Ohio every month without fail, that she turned down a boyfriend's proposal 2 years ago because her words, said quietly, almost to herself, "He wanted a version of me that made him comfortable, not the version that actually exists." He learned that she was funny in a dry, unshowy way that only came out once she trusted you enough to stop performing. And she learned things too. Not the truth, Never the truth, but a version of Adrian assembled from what he chose to give her, that he'd grown up around money but not with it, which was technically true and completely misleading, that he was saving up for something he wouldn't name, that he noticed things other people didn't, the way she tapped her pen 3 times before making a hard decision, the way her voice changed half an octave when she talked about her mother. "You pay too much attention," she told him one night, only half joking. "Is that a bad thing?" "It's a dangerous thing." She looked at him, something unguarded flickering behind her eyes before she caught it and pulled it back. "People who pay that much attention usually want something." "I do want something," Adrian thought. "I want to know if you'd still be standing here, if you knew who I actually was." He didn't say it. Instead, he said, "Maybe I just like listening to you." And the way she went quiet after that, not uncomfortable, just still, like something had landed and she was deciding what to do with it, told him everything he needed to know. This was no longer an experiment. This was something he was no longer sure he could walk away from clean. That IT was Marcus, his head of security, who found him afterward, standing in the parking garage stairwell where no cameras caught faces, only shadows. "You're supposed to be observing the building," Marcus said, "not falling for someone in it." Adrian didn't deny it. There was no point lying to the one man who'd watched this entire thing unfold from the beginning. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." Marcus's voice wasn't unkind, just heavy with the particular weariness of a man who'd seen rich men play games with real people's hearts before. "Adrian, Elena Vasquez doesn't know your last name comes with 9 zeros. When she finds out, and she will find out, she's not going to remember the man who listened to her. She's going to remember that you lied to her every single day for 2 months." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I never lied. I just didn't." "That's the same thing to a person who trusted you." Marcus shook his head. "There's a difference between omission with strangers and omission with someone who started falling for you. You crossed that line about 3 weeks ago, son. You just didn't want to admit it." The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Falling. Adrian thought of Elena's face the night before, tired, unguarded, laughing at something he'd said, looking at him like he was simply a man worth looking at, not a fortune worth marrying into. He thought about how many people in his entire life had looked at him that way. He could count them on one hand, maybe less. And somewhere above him, 40 floors up in an office with his mother's portrait on the wall, his father was waiting for an answer about Vienna, an answer Adrian now realized he'd already given weeks ago, without meaning to. No, he wasn't going back to being Adrian Cole, heir apparent, walking advertisement for a fortune he never asked for. Not yet. Not until he found out what happened when the truth finally came out. Because it would come out. He just didn't know yet that it would come out in the worst possible way. In a boardroom, in front of 40 people, with Elena standing close enough to hear every word. The email went out at 8 a.m. sharp, the way his father's announcements always did, clean, corporate, irreversible. Subject: Executive Restructuring. Coal Industries European Division effective immediately. Adrian J. Cole will assume the role of Chief Operating Officer, Vienna. A welcome address will be held in the 40th floor boardroom at 10 a.m. All senior staff are required to attend. Adrian read it standing at the front security desk, still in the gray uniform, and felt the ground till under him. His father hadn't waited, hadn't asked. 2 months of silence, and now this, a company-wide announcement, sent while Adrian was mid-shift, forced his hand in front of 200 people who thought his name was simply a Cole Security. He called his father's private line. It rang twice. "You need to be upstairs at 10, his father said, without hello. "You published this?" "Without telling me." "I told you 3 weeks ago I was done waiting. You wanted time. Adrian, I gave you 8 weeks. That's more patience than I've shown anyone in my life." A pause, colder now. "Whatever you've been doing down there, playing invisible man, dressing up like the help, it ends today. You have a company waiting on you. An empire I built, so you'd never have to prove yourself to strangers. And instead you spent 2 months proving yourself to people who don't matter. People who don't matter." Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. Somewhere on the 6th floor, Elena was probably already at her desk, tapping her pen 3 times before a hard decision. completely unaware that in less than 2 hours, the entire foundation of the man she'd started to trust was about to collapse in front of her. 10 o'clock, his father said again, and hung up. Adrian stood in the lobby a long moment, the gray uniform suddenly feeling like a costume he'd worn so long he'd forgotten it wasn't his skin. There was no version of this that ended clean. He could vanish now. Call in sick, disappear. Let her find out from a press release like everyone else, distant and safe, a stranger's face on a headline. Or he could walk upstairs in this uniform and let her watch the mask come off in real time. Both felt like betrayal. He chose the one that at least gave her the truth to his face. The room was already full when he stepped through the doors. 40 faces, department heads, senior partners, and near the back, arms crossed, Elena. He watched her clock the uniform first. Confusion flickering across her face. Why is a security guard in the executive boardroom? And then watched that confusion curdle into something else entirely as his father stood at the head of the table and said the words that ended everything. Everyone, I'd like to formally introduce my son, Adrian Cole, effective today, Chief Operating Officer of our Vienna office. Silence has a texture. Adrian had felt many kinds in his life. The silence of empty mansions, the silence of father's disappointment, the silence of a room that goes quiet when a headline breaks. This was a new one. 40 people recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the man in the gray uniform, all at once, all staring. But he wasn't watching 40 people. He was watching Elena. He watched the exact moment her face went from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like physical pain. The particular expression of someone doing frantic, silent math. 2 months. Every conversation. Every late night. Every coffee. Every single word he let me believe about him. She didn't say anything. That was somehow worse than if she'd screamed. She set down the folder she was holding very carefully, like it required all her concentration not to drop it, and walked out of the boardroom without a word. Not a scene, not a scandal, just a quiet, controlled exit that Adrian understood, with sick clarity, was the sound of a door closing forever. His father was still talking, synergies, transition timelines, quarterly targets, and Adrian heard none of it. He was already moving toward the door. He found her exactly where he knew he would. The same stairwell where he and Marcus had talked weeks ago, the one place in the building with no cameras, the one place people went when they needed to fall apart without an audience. She wasn't crying. That was almost worse. She was standing very still, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. Elena, don't. Her voice was steady in the way that takes enormous effort to fake. Don't say my name like you've earned the right to say it like that. I know how this looks. Do you? She finally turned to face him, and her eyes were dry and furious, and something worse than furious, humiliated. 2 months, Adrian. 2 months of you sitting at that desk, listening to me complain about deadlines, about my mother, about a company I spent 6 years trying to prove I deserved to work at, a company that you own. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated it. He could see her hating it. Did you think it was funny? Watching me talk about being scared I'd get fired, when you're literally the person who could fire everyone in this building with one signature. It was never a joke. Elena, I swear. You swear. She laughed, short and humorless. You know what the worst part is? I actually believe you were different. I thought, for the first time in years, I'd found someone who wasn't performing for me, who wasn't trying to impress me or use me or manage me. And it turns out you were performing the entire time. You just picked a different costume than everyone else. I wasn't performing. That's the part you're not hearing. Then what was it? Her voice rose, finally cracking open into something raw. What do you call 2 months of letting someone fall for a person who doesn't exist? The word landed, and neither of them moved to take it back. Falling. She'd said it herself now, out loud. And Adrian understood that in the middle of her anger, she just handed him the one true thing in the whole conversation, and immediately looked like she wished she hadn't. I call it the only 2 months of my entire life where someone looked at me and saw a person instead of fortune, Adrian said quietly. I didn't lie to become someone I'm not. Elena, I stopped lying long enough to find out who I actually am. Everything I told you, every conversation, every night in that lobby, that was me. The only thing I left out was a number. A number. Her voice was flat. "You left out that you're worth $40 billion, like at a footnote. I left it out because the second people know that number, they stop seeing me. You didn't see the number. You saw me. Do you understand how rare that is? How long I've waited for that?" She was quiet for a long moment, jaw tight, and Adrian let himself hope for exactly 3 seconds that the silence meant she was softening. It didn't. "I need you to understand something," she said finally, each word deliberate, controlled. "It doesn't matter why you lied. My mother worked 2 jobs, so I could believe that if I was smart enough and worked hard enough, people like your father wouldn't get to decide my life for me. And for 2 months, I let a coal into the one part of my life I actually built myself. That's not a small thing to me, Adrian. That's everything." She stepped past him toward the stairwell door. "Elena, please." "I have to go back to work," she said, not looking at him. "Under my new COO, apparently." The door closed behind her with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. He didn't see her for 3 weeks. Not because the building was large enough to make that easy. It wasn't. It was because Elena Vasquez, with the same discipline that had carried her from an unpaid internship to running half the acquisitions floor, simply removed him from her schedule. Meetings he was supposed to attend, she sent a deputy. Emails were answered by her assistant. When their paths crossed in a hallway once, she looked through him like glass. Adrian threw himself into the job. The real one now. No uniform, no disguise, a corner office on the 40th floor with a view that used to feel like a wall and now just felt like distance. He was good at it, efficient, decisive. The kind of executive his father had always insisted he could be if he'd just commit. But something his father never understood, something Adrian himself hadn't understood until the gray uniform and the marble lobby and 2 months of being invisible, was that competence had never been the thing missing from his life. Being known was, and he'd found it, briefly, with exactly one person, and then lost it in the space of a single sentence. It was Marcus who finally said what needed saying, catching Adrian alone in the executive elevator one evening, both of them staring straight ahead at the closed doors. "You know what she's doing right now?" Marcus said. "What?" "Working 11-hour days trying to convince herself she's not still thinking about you." Marcus shrugged when Adrian turned to look at him. "I talked to Ronnie. Ronnie talks to everybody. This building runs on the same thing it always ran on when you were down at that desk. People underestimating who's actually listening. She has every right to hate me." "She has every right to be angry," Marcus corrected. "That's not the same thing as hate. Hate doesn't leave the building 40 minutes after you do every night for 3 weeks straight, timed almost exactly, so she doesn't have to see you in the lobby." He let that sit. "That's not hate, son. That's a woman protecting herself from something she's scared she still wants." Adrian said nothing the rest of the ride-up, but something in his chest, dormant for 3 weeks, started cautiously to hope again. What Adrian didn't know, what he wouldn't learn until much later, and what recontextualized nearly everything that happened next, was that his father had not simply waited 8 weeks out of patience. He had been watching. Every camera in that lobby fed back to a private security review his father had quietly ordered the week Adrian disappeared into a gray uniform. Not to catch his son in a lie, but to understand, for the first time in Adrian's 29 years, who his son actually was when no one was performing for him. His father had watched the footage of late nights in the lobby, had watched his son laugh, genuinely laugh, an expression his father hadn't seen since Adrian's mother died, at something a junior acquisitions associate said while leaning against a front desk. He had watched his son become, for the first time, a person instead of an heir. And it was that footage, not boardroom politics, not shareholder pressure, that had made him finally send the Vienna announcement, not to punish Adrian, to force the truth into daylight before his son disappeared into disguise permanently and lost himself entirely. "I didn't do it to hurt you," his father admitted, the one time Adrian confronted him about the timing. "I did it because I watched 2 months of footage of my son being happy, and I realized if I let it go on, you'd never come back upstairs at all. I gave you the truth before you could give it away completely." It wasn't an apology. It was, for a man like Robert Cole, close enough it was Elena who came to him this time, a fact that told Adrian everything before she said a single word. She stood in the doorway of his office, the same folder under one arm posture from the day they met, except this time her eyes weren't dismissive. They were uncertain, which on Elena Vasquez looked almost like courage. "I did something today," she said. "I turned down a promotion." Adrian set down his pen. "What?" "Senior director, reporting directly to your father, twice my current salary." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I turned it down because the entire time he was offering it, all I could think was, he's testing whether I actually wanted this job or whether I just wanted access to the sun." "Elena, you've earned every promotion you've ever gotten. You know that." "I did something today," she said. "I turned down a promotion." Adrian set down his pen. "What?" "Senior director, reporting directly to your father, twice my current salary." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I turned it down because the entire time he was offering it, all I could think was, he's testing whether I actually wanted this job or whether I just wanted access to the sun." "Elena, you've earned every promotion you've ever gotten. You know that." "I know that now. I spent 3 weeks not sure I did." She crossed her arms, but it wasn't offensive this time. It looked more like she was holding herself together. "I've been so angry at you for 2 months, Adrian. Angry that you let me build something real with a person who technically didn't exist. But somewhere in there, I realized I wasn't actually angry at you for having money. I was angry because for 6 years I built an entire identity around the idea that people like your family don't get to be real, to people like me. And then you were. And it broke a rule I needed to believe in to survive this industry. I never wanted to break anything of yours." "I know." Her voice softened, just slightly. "That's the problem. If you'd done it to manipulate me, if there had been an angle, a plan, something cruel underneath it, I could hate you cleanly. But you didn't do it to me. You did it for yourself. You were drowning in your own name, and for 2 months you found air. And I was standing right there when you found it, and I didn't even know I was the air." Adrian stood, crossing the office slowly, stopping a careful distance away, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to leave her room to walk away if she needed to. "You were never the disguise. Elena, you were the only real thing in it." She looked at him a long moment, something in her expression finally cracking open. Not surrender, exactly, but the exhausted Anna holding a wall up for a month straight. "I don't know how to trust a man whose last name is on the building I work in," she said quietly. "Then don't trust a name," Adrian said. "Trust the person who spent 2 months sitting behind a desk, listening to you talk about your mother, because it was the only part of his day that felt honest. That man's still here, Elena. He didn't disappear when the uniform came off. He's just standing in a nicer office now." For the first time in a month, she almost smiled, small, reluctant, real. "You're still insufferably patient," she said. "That hasn't changed. Some things about a person don't." She was quiet a long moment, and then she said the thing Adrian had stopped letting himself hope to hear. "Buy me a coffee. The good one. Not whatever they serve on this floor." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," she said, but she was already reaching for the door. Glancing back at him was something that looked unmistakably like the beginning of forgiveness. "Don't lie to me again, Adrian Cole, about anything, not even small things." "I won't. I mean it." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I won't." He spent his whole life being loved for a name he never chose. It took losing that name completely for someone to finally love the man standing underneath it.